Initially, we looked at coaching and mentoring and going through to the theory and going through different layers of perhaps what would be a good practitioner, what would not be good practice. And I found that really useful because it sort of lifted the layers of my own teaching really, and I could really look at myself in a lot more depth and think about how I was going about things, how I could coach people or mentor them in a different way. So I found that particular module valuable and benefited my teaching, but also me as a mentor for ITT or NQTs as well. It made me perhaps look at the types of questions that I was asking in terms of the response that I was trying to get out of NQT. So definitely invaluable module of the course.
I suppose the main benefit for me has been encouraging us to be a bit more reflective. I think we do quite a lot of stuff in education. They always say that teaching is a really hard job. I think we do an awful lot of it quite intuitively. Yeah. Whereas sometimes we don't have the luxury of time, if time is a luxury, to just stop, think what we're doing, decide if that's the best course of action, and then modify it accordingly. If you had examples of that?
Yeah, it's definitely given you an opportunity to reflect on your practice.
Yeah.
With teaching and supporting other colleagues as well.
Mentoring and coaching is something we do every single day, probably every single hour of every single day. I mean, particularly, with pupils, we always take it for granted. Even if you don't apply that mentoring and coaching label, it's what we are doing, essentially. Yeah. Regarding staff, again, I think there is a temptation to kind of apply a lot of the same strategies you use with pupils to adults, and I think some of them cross over, some of them don't. But you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think some are applicable, but getting a greater range of strategies for dealing with adults is something that I found quite useful from the mentoring and coaching.
I was a new mentor. I'd never mentored on an official capacity before last year, so I found it invaluable when dealing with other adults. Some of the strategies that you talked about and some of the strategies that were introduced to us. But if I hadn't have done that, I'd have been at a total loss to how to approach it.
There are some things that, I mean, some of the stuff you read and it doesn't really strike a chord with your own particular role at that particular moment, but there are some things that I think everyone found useful. I don't know if you, I kind of internalised the directive and non-directive spectrum, and whenever I'm dealing with anyone, whether it's a pupil or a member of staff, that's one of those things that crosses over. I always think, where am I on that line? And because I'm a visual person, I always just think of that line, oh, I'm a 7 today, oh, I'm going to have to be a 3 and crack down and that sort of thing.
I don't do it quite so consciously as that, but yeah, it is evident in what I do now. Yeah.
Nothing that I've done has been an add-on. It's all been, maybe that's just because where I've focused my reading, I've gone for more detail on things that directly affect my day-to-day practice, and slightly longer term as well. But I've picked the assignments, tailoring them around things I do already, but things that I want to improve. So I've done quite a lot of action research, being involved with the whole process as I go.
I think initially the first thing was realising that yes, I can work at this level, because there's always an unknown, isn't there, when you're starting to do something for the first time. So the first couple of sessions I kind of sat back and watched and got the measure of things, and then I thought, no, actually I can do this, and it's really, really interesting. So I think that's been one of the first benefits. The second benefit, and probably the most important, is being able to mix with different staff, you know, being able to mix with NQTs that are new to the school and people from other school as well, because you've benefited from their experience. That's been the best thing about it for me, most definitely.
I think when you've not done an academic course for quite a number of years, you forget that you were once able to do this type of work, and for me it was a confidence building exercise in terms of can I get back into that level of study, and rather like my colleague here, for me it was a bit of watching, a bit of reflection first to ensure that, you know, I was going to make a valid contribution and to be able to do the type of work that we needed to do. And by and large I think it's been exactly the type of level of study I've needed to engage with.